Hey, Johna, how are you?
I am doing great. Good to see you again, Nick. You look incredibly vibrant and happy.
Oh my God, you're so good. Thank you. Yeah, no, I feel good. I feel vibrant. Feel happy. You know,
That
You
those are all good
always,
things.
yeah. No, thank you. I got that. Yeah, you look healthy as you always do. Healthy and wonderful. So, how you doing?
I'm doing great. A lot of that has to do with the fact that this is a Tuesday, so it's sort of the beginning of the week for me.
Oh,
So
yeah.
always a good thing.
Oh my. I usually I dread Mondays. And usually by Thursday I'm pretty good. So I'm kind of in reverse cycle to you.
You're probably a night owl too.
I know I wake up early. I like
Interesting.
getting up at 6, and because I usually have the whole house to myself, and I'll watch the morning unfold, and have breakfast, you know. I'll
I'm
kind of
with
read.
you. I get up some usually between 5 and 6:30 on the earlier side if I can because I like to watch. In my living room I can overlook the water so I can kind of watch the sunrise over the water, which is always pretty awesome.
Yeah, that's like yeah, that's special. That's great. Yeah, I love mornings. They're almost like one of my favorite times of the day, and that's that it's somewhat solitude, but also I spend a lot of time kind of consuming news, not TV news, but like, reading news, so yeah.
That's funny. Our rituals are very similar because, yeah, I check the news, but I don't read like the day to day stuff. Like
Yeah.
enough time, there's enough time during the day to read that. It's like what happened in the world and what happened in science are my two go tos.
Oh, yeah, you're good. Very good. Awesome. Actually, I've been a Wall Street Journal fan for like decades.
Uh
I'm
huh.
starting to wane though. I'm starting to like, yeah, I'm not sure like if it's doing it for me anymore.
I
Just
don't really. I know it's a trendy thing to say, but I don't usually do the mainstream media at all. I
mhm.
tend to read whatever random articles will point me towards scientific, papers in scientific journals, and they don't have to be like
Yeah,
super deep papers. I mean, but
yeah,
anything that's actually published research, I'm very interested in. And what I found fascinating, Nick, is I have a habit of just noting the idiosyncratic top headlines of the day because my theory is when I look back over this a year or two from now, I'll be like, wow, this is very interesting. And I've noticed
mm.
that like all the science news is about space travel. And I'm like,
Huh.
wait a second. If you go back in time, even 10 or 15 years, there wasn't much
Mm.
about it. And all the
Nothing really.
news was more about biology and physics. And now it'll be
Mm.
like 10 space travel, developments to one physics development to like zero point zero 0.01 biology developments. It's like, huh, that's interesting.
Yeah. All right, so let's kind of shift our focus a little bit, and talk about like our industry. And we've been focusing a lot around kind of like how it seems like right after Onuk Fall, like a light bulb kind of went off on everybody, and it was like actually it was after Andy Brown and Phil T's presentation. And so we've been now focused all around kind of AI's impact on our industry. So I know you've been spending a lot of time in this space, as well. So what have you been kind of thinking about?
Well, first and foremost, I'm old enough to be sort of skeptical of the sudden interest in AI because back when I was in school, we were still doing AI and we actually, AI is this umbrella term that encapsulates lots of techniques, things like neural networks, things like expert systems, things
Mm-hmm.
like machine learning, all subsets of AI. So it's really just a question of which tool is suddenly super hot today. And as we all know, large language models are it. And I think, the genius was that OpenAI exposed ordinary humans for the first time to what you could do with large language models. And that turned out to be fascinating because it created a moment in public consciousness where people went, oh my gosh, not only has AI passed the Turing test, but it's gone far beyond it. And people who didn't even know what
Mm-hmm.
the Turing test was started talking about deep fakes and things like that.
Yeah.
So
It's
So
like the monkey
all
at the circus, all of a sudden
right,
became real. You could see like a
exactly.
computer actually typing for you. I was like, what? Anyway, but go ahead.
Exactly. And I think the problem is that it isn't really new, and all the problems are, I mean, it is new, but it's not new, if that makes sense. Because all the problems with AI are problems we've run into previously. Things like the authenticity of sources. And again, when I'm saying AI, I'm cheating, and I mean LLMs. So the authenticity of sources. Well, that was a problem in the 1990s when the internet suddenly happened, because anybody could put up a website and say anything. And people still think things like Wikipedia are, came down from Mount Sinai with Moses. And it's like, no, it's just what
Yeah,
some guy who had more
yeah,
patience than you do would
yeah,
sit there and write and edit out everybody who said anything that disagreed with them. And sometimes they're correct and sometimes they're not. So the same thing with
yeah,
AI. And I think people fundamentally misunderstand what LLMs do and don't do, and to what degree they're powerful tools, and to what degree they're more than that, I guess is the way I would put it.
yeah,
You know, it's because we've
yeah.
seen
But
all this before.
well, yeah, and actually, you really think about it, like our industry in particular, it's that we probably were the first part. If you think about compute storage and networking, I would think we're probably one of the first in that kind of area to actually adopt machine learning. And so it's like you have routers that kind of like populate routing tables, and that's run by running kind of a Dijkstra, model, and
Exactly.
identifying the shortest path
Exactly.
first. So it's and it was interesting because I remember back in this was like in the mid 80s kind of time frame, is that a lot of people were just saying at that time is that, oh well, we're not going to need anybody to kind of manage these things, they're going to manage themselves. And now look, there's like hundreds of thousands of like network engineers that have to manage this stuff. So I think, so we've had some experience, here, but I think where we're focusing like on two different, areas. One is that the enterprise is a little bit slow, and they always are, to kind of adopt whether those are going to be private AI workloads or consuming public AI workloads. But so there's a new workload archetype that's coming into the marketplace, and then okay, how does a infrastructure, networking and security support that? I think that's one kind of whole category of thinking, right now. And then the other one, and I think this is also equally fascinating, and that is what happens when kind of either kind of AI algorithms can start to move deeper into protocol stacks. So, for example, we have least cost routing, and so that cost is really based upon kind of like one or two metrics. Most of the time it's packet loss or it's latency, right? And so what happens, like, can we now look at security posture, on that? Can we now start to factor in overall cost, like from one point to the other point, end to end, latency, dollar cost, the latency and the availability of bandwidth, the reliability of that connection, and so forth. So like now, the relationship between that infrastructure, networking and security, is presented differently to an application that may not be an AI workload, it could be a traditional application. So that relationship starts to shift and change, now, and that where networking was essentially a connectivity service, and over the last few years, we've been kind of trying to like converge security into that infrastructure. So, but now it seems like there is an acceleration point there, and where networking isn't just a connectivity service, it really connotes a different kind of relationship for the application, and will kind of deliver the user experience for that application based upon policies and controls that are established. So I think so we're kind of like focusing on those two areas, right now, and I think they're both kind of fascinating to think about. Maybe one other example is like on the security side of it, like, so we have really good anomalistic behavior identification systems. And
Mm-hmm.
so but those are usually go to instant response centers, and usually either people, or there could be SOARs that that automate that response. Well, what if you have an LLM that identifies that anomalous behavior, writes some code, and then has the ability to deploy that like really quick? One, do you trust it, which is going to be the key. But assuming you do trust it after some period of time, that's a whole other way of kind of dealing with security and threats, as they come,
Well,
knocking.
I completely agree. I'm going to bring you back to a point that you made that I don't think is quite correct. You said the enterprise is slow to deploy AI.
So glad you're here to police my words, but go ahead.
Exactly. Yeah, it's what I do, Nick. It's what I do.
Go ahead.
We actually did a research study this past summer where we interviewed a huge range of enterprise organizations, and on average, about 61% were using enterprise AI today. Among the larger companies and financial firms, that was as high as 86%. So we are seeing an awful lot of use of AI.
So what were they doing?
Well, that's a great question. We asked people whether we asked them whether they were doing it within IT or within the lines of business. And interestingly, the percentages roughly tracked, but when you double click down, they had many more people involved in AI in lines of business. So the two use cases that you're coming up with, cybersecurity and networking, were two of the top two, and also the sub use case, which is code writing, showed up in sort of across the board within the IT component, which is separate from the lines of business who, these may be people using chatbots to talk to their customers, which is not at all what you're talking about. You're talking about something much more specific. So I would say yes, and yes, which is all those things are happening. That said, I would just want to point out that there's a fundamental flaw with LLMs, which is this. Hallucinations can't be weeded out without drastically reducing the effectiveness of your LLM. So it's not like you can say, well, we have these hallucinations and we'll just sort of winnow them out and just have really powerful LLMs. You can't. It turns out that the more you twist that dial and reduce the hallucinations, the less effective and the less creative and the less useful AI is. So what that means, LLMs, excuse me, I keep saying AI meaning LLMs. Yeah. So what that means is you need to use it in scenarios where you don't actually care about hallucinations. So for example, the scenario you articulated where it's like, oh, let's watch what's going on and see if there's an anomaly and write some code and push it out there. I would never use it for that without human curation in there, which is, okay, have it write the code, let the human have a couple of seconds to look at it and think about it and decide whether to push that button to push it out, because the trade-off is that you may be doing something really, really random and really bad. Now,
for sure.
The flip side is that if you are an attacker, LLMs are a godsend. Because here's the thing, I don't care how many hallucinations I create, because if I'm attacking you and say 10% of my attacks are supposedly exploiting a vulnerability that doesn't exist because the LLM made it up, I don't care. As long as the other 90% are really effective. And so I'm going to twist that dial all the way up to get the most creative attacks on you. So what LLMs do is they actually disadvantage cybersecurity specialists against the attackers, because the best of the attackers are going to have a much more powerful tool than the best of the defenders.
Because, well, that could very well be. It's like, we'd see an arms race there. More than likely, we will see an arms race, there. And that's,
we're already seeing it. And the problem is the attackers are already advantaged because of this fundamental issue, which is that the hallucinations don't matter when you're attacking, but do matter when you're defending.
Yeah. Well, and also, like you look at a hacker, it's like they see a response to an attack across, potentially hundreds of thousands of companies. And so they know what could be more effective. So like their systems are learning better than a company that's trying to protect themselves, So there might be, No, but that can also be sold as a service, as well. The bottom line. I think there's a big market that we're all now starting to march towards and starting to think about and trying to
Well,
like level that playing field.
and I think where Onug has really zeroed in
Mm,
and done a great job, and in all seriousness,
mm,
kudos to you for this, is this idea that network optimization is going to have to be AI dependent. And over time,
um,
you're going to see it being a mix of quantum and AI, because quantum algorithms have some advantages that classical algorithms don't, particularly when it comes to networking and particularly when it comes to policies. So, kind of
mm,
in my head, the scenario is LLMs give attackers the short term advantage. LLMs plus quantum gives defenders the long term advantage. So, the challenge to the network and cybersecurity folks between now and then, and particularly the people who are operating at scale, like the carriers, is how to hopscotch around all the challenges to get to that long term advantage. Because quantum's
yeah.
further out than AI is, and
Mm,
you need to stay ahead of the curve while the attackers are really gearing up. And I'm a bit
mm,
fanatical about this, because one of the other things I've seen in one of our more recent studies, we looked at NetSecOps and the convergence of network operations and security operations. And we found
yeah.
it's much less prevalent among enterprises than you'd expect. Only about a third of organizations are doing it,
Mm,
which is a little bit worrisome. But as a side note, as part of that research, we found that enterprises are kind of scaling back and kind of treating cybersecurity as though it's almost a solved problem. They kind of look at it and they say, well, we have smart people, we've got a CISO, and so we're going to go worry about other things like how to implement AI in our network or something like that. And I think that's a
mm.
terribly dangerous thing to be doing right now, precisely because of what LLMs are giving attackers.
Yeah, I don't know. Maybe we might be kind of looking at the same thing and with different angles. So on the whole Knox-Sock integration piece, that's actually one of the most popular projects that we have right now within ONUG, and maybe
Oh
that's
yeah.
because because people are just really kind of looking for how to approach this. We actually have a really great session coming up in Dallas on this. So that would be really good. Actually, Alex Schulman's going to have a really great session too. She has I think Facebook coming in, Novartis, Merck, I forget one other company coming in to really going to. So I kind of view that whole part about anomalistic behavior identification and then rapid response to that with an LLM kind of writing code and deploying that. That's that topic, and that's part of, I believe, this Knox-Sock integration, because it's like we're really kind of looking at this changing workflows, and can you kind of take Knox and
Absolutely.
Socks and right and
I,
and
I
turn
I
them
don't.
into like response centers? Yeah,
Yeah, I don't disagree at
go ahead.
all. And in fact, I agree with your logic 100%, that one ought to think that this makes
Yeah,
sense. What the difference is, I think this is one of those cases where you're looking ahead at the road to come, and we've got on, I won't say the rear view mirror, but we're asking companies if they've already done it. And the answer
yeah,
is no.
yeah,
And the reason
yeah,
it's such a hot topic is because they are starting to do it. I will tell you a
yeah.
couple things that are valuable. What we found is that converging the knock and sock, first of all, is much more common in highly productive companies who have revenues of more than $1 million per employee,
Hmm.
which is a subcategory of the companies that we look at. And the second
Yeah.
thing is that knock-sock convergence tends to be quantifiable in terms of the performance of the network. Networks are much more resilient if you do the knock-sock convergence. Interestingly,
That's an
what
interesting
you
finding. Yeah.
yeah, what you don't see yet, and I think you will see, but you don't see yet, is an improvement in our key metric for cybersecurity, which is the median total time to contain an event.
Hmm.
And we were a little surprised by that. We expected there to be a much tighter correlation between knock-sock convergence and MTTC. It's not there yet, but we expect it will be.
Yeah, that's interesting. Well, that's a great metric to measure.
Oh, yeah.
That by. Yeah, it's interesting too. It's like I think some of the vision that's starting to get painted, and you have to kind of like turn your head sideways and squint to try to see it.
Yep,
You know,
exactly.
is it's like the Knox Talk integration is kind of a preview towards a much more streamlined operations. For infrastructure. So if you kind of think about like what this era kind of represents is okay. A whole new relationship between infrastructure and developers and then the applications, and then a very different operational model. And so, like, there is the last, number I heard actually was from James Beeson over at Cigna, who just recently retired. He was a CISO there. About 750,000 open recs for security engineers, and something similar on network engineers. So we know, and that's a worldwide number. So it's like we're never going to close that gap.
We may not need to, though, as your point about AI really stepping in and picking up some of the heavy lifting. I think is valid in that context. But yes, I think we can't keep doing what we're doing and expecting the results to be different. So we're going to have to get more efficient. And I think the Knox-Sock convergence is going to be a key piece of that. I just think we're not as far along as the vendors want us to believe, but that's okay. That just means there's that much more room for improvement.
I totally agree. Go ahead.
I was just going to say it's
John,
interesting because
John.
we asked folks why they weren't converging, and my favorite two answers were we're too big and we're too small. And we had companies literally saying, if I were bigger, that would make more sense, or if I were smaller, that would make more sense. We're like, guys, no, no. But
That's funny.
it is kind of interesting, and I hope more companies. I hope as an outcome of ONUG, of people getting familiar with our research, people are going to start considering this convergence and assessing doing it sooner rather than later.
Yeah. I think they're going to be forced to. So I think it's kind of the writings on the wall there. But I think maybe one other topic, and that's around skills, and like what we're kind of seeing is that is probably the biggest barrier of entry for either consuming new AI models, but also too, like, there are no new dedicated products. There are, like, in some certain areas, but all the AI stuff is really coming in our industry is coming from existing vendors, to existing products. Right. They're new modules, they're new kind of management, software, so there isn't like a startup company that this is the new network AI
Exactly.
company.
It's a feature. It's a feature. It's not a product.
Yeah. So you would hope that those kind of that culmination of those features, then deliver the value that they're looking for, which is really, I think, in essence, being able to do a lot more without a lot more people. But anyway, so on skills, and like there's been, like, in the I guess at the general press, maybe I'm not sure where it's kind of coming from, but essentially, like, AI first, like, will come for your jobs and then it'll kill you. so where's your on the taking of your jobs and the skill set? Have you kind of like looked into that? Have you thought about what this means to, like, the kind of existing network and security engineers out there?
Well, we did more than that. We actually asked the folks that we interviewed, and the vast majority say no, they don't believe AI is going to come for their jobs. And I think they're correct, but not entirely so. And let me put it this way. The general consensus is AI is going to create more jobs than it steals. But the advice I give most people is, look, to the degree your job consists of manual cutting and pasting, that job is toast. You should not be doing that anyway because you're a human, and that's not what we're good at innately. And AI will be capturing more and more of that. So I do think some of the really routine stuff that it's amazing that network engineers are even still doing in this day and age, I think some of that stuff's going to get replaced, but it's going to get replaced by network engineers who are subject matter experts and can wrangle AIs, because the big gap that AIs are going to create is in subject matter experts. And if you think about it, it makes sense, because how do you get a subject matter expert? You take somebody You have them do routine kinds of things, rote things, and then they move up the skills chain, and then they manage people who do those routine, rote things. Well, with AI, there won't be that path anymore. So now somebody who actually understands what's going on at a very deep level, because they've come up through that path, isn't going to exist. So we're going to have to come up with other ways to come up with subject matter expertise so that you can effectively wrangle the AIs. So AI wrangling in the context of security, and AI wrangling in the context of networking, and AI wrangling in the context of lots of different things is going to become a whole new job, and you need those core skills to do it.
Yeah, I think, it's like I've heard a really good quote, and it basically says that AI isn't going to take your job. It's like somebody with AI skills is going to take your job, so it's like, and I think the expertise thing, that's actually, I think a really, really powerful observation that you just made. And it's that the AI will learn that over time, and having that deep knowledge of infrastructure and networking and protocols and how they work and how they behave, that may not be a needed skill.
Well, that piece,
like in the next 5 years.
Yeah, that I agree with, but I think subject matter expertise is broader. So, for example, what purpose is the network serving if you're FedEx? How is that different if you're J&J? I think that level of expertise is something that AI can vastly assist with at levels that boggle the mind today. Because right now you're still going to run into network engineers who essentially, to figure out what this network does, this piece of the network does, let's disconnect it and see who screams.
Yeah, I know.
Right?
Or they'll ping certain places to see if they have connectivity. I know. It's I think, well, finally, really, it's like nice that, that there's kind of a generation of technology that will kind of move our industry forward. And I just, the one fear that I have is that we don't move quick enough. It's like the cloud computing model started in 2007, 2008 timeframe,
something
probably
like
2007 timeframe, right? And networking is just starting. Like, so you think about cloud computing, okay, great. It's a hosted model. You kind of start doing, servers, VMs, containers, like serverless, in a cloud. And so developers can consume that. But networking didn't change. We just kind of connected everybody to that. And so now, it's, how many years later is that, that we're finally just starting to see kind of NAS products or services come on the marketplace that have the same delivery model. And I guess it was okay during those years, like it wasn't really kind of driving the marketplace that much for networking to be cloud based. But I don't think AI is going to be that way. I don't think we're going to have the luxury of postponing it. I think this is a bigger wave. It's like no army, I think, is strong enough to stop this from, actually coming into our industry and fundamentally changing, the way that we've, thought about, these jobs and these structures, and kind of the overall just value proposition of kind of what the infrastructure does. So,
well, I'm gonna respond with 2 words that will shock you. I agree.
Oh my, that is yes. Okay, it's a shocker, but it's a pleasant shock.
Well,
all right.
And on that note, Nick, I think I will sign off. Thank you very much for inviting me to be part of this. It's been fun, as you promised.
Oh my God, so great, Johna. Thanks so much for taking the time. And I know it was a little bit, difficult to get on your schedule. So thanks so much for making the time.
Absolutely, and talk to you soon, I hope.
Great. Yeah. Thanks to everybody. Thanks for listening.